Hey ladies and gents, how are you guys doing? I just wanted to do a quick intro for the next video that you'll be checking out by Inquirer Rachel, myself. It's going to be called A Night of Brainstorming. Just had a couple ladies over at the house and wanted to kind of discuss, their trials and tribulations, how they dealt with COVID. I hate to keep bringing up the topic, but it does definitely still come up in conversation. The things that they want to see on my show and their dreams and aspirations. So I hope that you stay tuned and tune in because it's coming up next. Thank you so much for the support. It's really appreciated. But check out this episode, A Night of Brainstorming. Tell me just a little bit about you and tell our viewers. So if you can each just introduce yourself and tell me just a little bit about you, or tell our viewers a little bit about yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Gina Peterson. I am a resident of Connecticut. I'm a nurse and I'm a teacher. You?
Hi everyone, I'm Jennifer Peterson. I'm Gina's sister-in-law. I am also a nurse. I work in New York City. I've worked in the ICU and labor and delivery.
Perfect.
Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Brianna Dodson. I am a content creator from New York City.
Thank you all for being here. So this is going to be just a chill conversation between all of us. And I have to bring up the inevitable, which is COVID, right?
Yeah.
It's 2023. We're past all of that. We're not mandated to wear masks anymore. But what I want to ask you all is, how have you changed since COVID happened? What was that transition like, and what's different, or what do you find different about yourselves or your lives? And we could start with you, Gina.
So I was working per diem at in acute care in nursing at the time the pandemic started, but was teaching full-time nursing at the time. And I started to feel a lot of pressure to pick up more shifts and work in the hospital more. And it just really made me turn inward and reflect a lot about what in my career brought me joy. And I felt a lot of shame and guilt for not wanting to pick up the number of shifts that was being asked of me, and the number of calls I was getting every day was a lot. So a lot of inward reflection, but ultimately wound up leaving the per diem position a year and a half later. And to make that decision was a hard one, to separate and to explore more about who I am in addition to being a nurse, not just I am a nurse and that is all that I am. And I started writing more. So I've been actually just reflecting on that. May will be 3 years since I've started writing poetry again.
Oh,
so
that's nice.
Yeah.
A way to kind of let your feelings out and what you're thinking, and kind of organize your thoughts in a different form.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice.
So yeah, finding my voice through poetry has been really interesting. Spending a lot of time with myself on pen and paper. So it's been fun.
A bit of reflection.
Yeah. So that's how it's like been a bit of an identity, coming of age story, I guess, for myself. Yeah.
Beautiful. What about you, Jen?
So I was in the heart of the pandemic. So I worked in the medical ICU at a big hospital in New York City. And I worked there for about 2 years before the pandemic. And then I worked there all through the pandemic. So I felt like when I was in it, I wasn't really totally aware of like the gravity of the situation that I was in. I remember like back in like February, we had our first COVID patient. And I remember like everyone, I was like, oh my gosh, like people are overreacting. This is ridiculous. This is the flu. Like, what are people doing? Like, why are people wearing gloves to the grocery store? Like, enough. And I was wrong. I was wrong. And then like all hell broke loose. And I remember my hospital, created hundreds of ICU beds. And as a nurse, it was kind of an insane place to be, and especially as a nurse who felt like this pandemic was in my wheelhouse. Technically, like working in a medical ICU, like I was comfortable with ventilators, I was comfortable with sedation, I was comfortable with these things, and feeling very overwhelmed, unsafe patient assignments, and just, you know, you could go on and on about all the things that you saw. But it was really difficult. And I think a couple things that stick out to me was, one, the duality of feeling very supported in New York City. We got so much food delivered. People didn't know how to help. They gave us like anything they could to try and help the healthcare workers. And at 7 o'clock, we'd go out and there'd be police sirens and fire trucks and people clapping and banging pots and pans. And it's like, oh my gosh, like people really feel for you. And then, you know, a couple weeks later, feeling like this isn't, people saying, you know, on the news that this isn't real, and
all this different type of stuff that was flying around at that time.
So it was difficult for me. I probably had one of my worst days as a nurse during the pandemic. And the other thing that was challenging was, as nurses started going back to the units they came from and the ICU started closing down and things started to get better, I was still in the medical ICU. Which / COVID ICU. So even though everywhere else in the hospital was like, now we're doing elective procedures again and things are going back to normal. Now you're an OR nurse again, you're a labor nurse again, you're a whatever nurse. It was like, well, I'm still
like
the COVID nurse.
Yeah, you are. Yep.
Damn it! So it sucked. And I don't think people were kind of like, okay, like let's put a ribbon on it, like that's done. Moving on. And I was like, oh, but I'm still there.
I'm still here.
So eventually it just got to be a lot. People were leaving my unit, and I was one of them. I said, I don't want to be the last person on the Titanic. I can see the writing on the wall. So I'm going to see what else I can do. So for me, it caused a career change. And I also think it just really made me kind of a little bit more aware of, I just feel like so much like how like the government can influence our decisions, but also about like how health is so important, and that truly like seeing different people is, it doesn't matter how much money you make, it doesn't matter what you do. Like if you're not healthy, no amount of money's gonna fix that. No amount of, you know.
If you're not healthy and you're not happy.
And
I see that transition happening with people post-COVID. It's like, I understand that I have to work, I understand I have to go to school, but I understand that I have to live my life. And I understand that I have to be happy living my life. And that's where everyone's like, okay, I'm taking all my vacation days. Oh, I don't feel well, I'm not going to work today. Oh, I need a mental health day. Take my mental health day. So I've seen that happen drastically.
I'm no longer participating in the toxic systems that have been built.
And I think a little bit too for me, it was like, oh, you being the institution, the hospital, whatever, you don't care. I'm a little worker ant when it comes to it. I'm a little worker nurse, and you know, I have friends, I have this, I have that, but like if something were to happen to me, like I get replaced. So I'm gonna take care of myself. I'm gonna say, you know what, this unit is great, but not serving me, and I'm gonna go find something that serves me better. And I think it took the pandemic for me to kind of be like, no, I'm gonna put myself first. And I think that's really hard coming from, you know, the way I was raised, and like, I think being a woman, I think all of these things, that to say, no, I'm putting myself first is hard, but it's something that helped a lot of people do.
Which is perfect. And you do have to put yourself first, because you know what? If anything happens to you, that wheel will keep turning. Every single day, it will keep turning. And you will just be like, oh, let's send her a card or send her some flowers. And in 6 weeks, it's like, oh, she's not coming back? Okay, moving on to the next person.
I think that speaks to the guilt that I was feeling too, about not wanting to kind of pick up all those extra shifts in addition to my full-time job that I had. I felt like, now that I'm reflecting on it, it's like it speaks to exactly what you were saying, that the guilt has sort of been built into the system, that the people pleasers, the helpers go into nursing, go into healthcare, right? But that can be a good thing, right? But also you can be very much taken advantage of. And they weren't calling me specifically for my particular nursing skill set. It was warm body RN. Was being called.
Warm body, possibly not really sick, but you could still make it to work and do the full shift. Just put a mask on, come to work.
Right. Come on, come help your team.
Come on down.
So,
What about you, Bree?
So for me, the pandemic, it it was a bit of a wake-up call in a different way. So when the pandemic hit in full swing, I had just graduated from my first college institution, and I had just got enrolled into John Jay, and I was going to do the pre-med program. And with everything that had started going on, like my school shut down, we started doing online reading, online classes. I was like, you know what, maybe nursing isn't the way to go. Because I realized, it's like, nursing, it's cool, like, the hours, the pay, the helping out, all of that is great. But then if something hits the fan, if shit hits the fan, you are the front line. And it wasn't something I truly thought about, because I was like, well, we don't have plagues like that. Like, people do get sick. We do have, bad flu seasons or anything like that. But there isn't really any time where, like, the industry's in dire need of nurses, and then the pandemic happened. I was like, you know what, maybe not, because I wanted to do become a registered nurse, and then I had wanted to do CRNA, like be the assistant to the anesthesiologist, because chemistry, medical medicine, all of that's my jam. I always find working with drugs and pharmaceuticals very interesting. And then, like, so when the pandemic hit and they were like, well, we don't know what we're gonna do. We just have these people like on ventilators and beds. I'm like, so there's no cure? Y'all don't know what you're, So for me, I was like, all right, let's take a step back and reevaluate this career choice. And so then, funny enough, I was actually asked, like, hey, well, if this because like in the beginning, like everyone else, my mom thought like, oh yeah, it's only gonna be a couple of weeks.
Yep.
So my mom's like, here, go stay with a friend, come back in 3 weeks, everything will all be done. And then it turned into a month, and then 2 months, and then 3 months. And I was asked, so you've been here for a while, do you have any hobbies? And I was like, I mean, yeah, like, I like studying languages, I like doing all this stuff. And I'm like, well, like, why not figure out something new to do that you can, like, kind of put your time to? And that is how I started running my own small business.
Yeah.
Because I saw a passing video for making dice out of resin. And I was like, oh, that looks kind of cool. I could probably do that. And because the pandemic gave us, well, really nothing but time in the beginning, since everything was shut down, there was nowhere to go, there was nothing to do. That's kind of what kickstarted me making a dice business. And then from there, it grew into content creation, because it's like, well, you gotta figure out how to promote your stuff. You gotta figure out how to, like, get the word out. And that turned into content creation. And then from there, it turned into streaming. So for me, I went complete 180. I went from going to work into the medical field to becoming like a kind of like a internet personality and content creation, social media, which is something that I never thought that I would do, because like when you're younger, your parents always tell you like, oh, you're gonna go to law school, you're gonna be a doctor, you're gonna be an engineer, you're gonna be an electrician, even maybe. Nobody ever talks about like the smaller fields, like things like content creation, right? Which is very, very big nowadays. Everybody has. Thing. It is.
It's the it thing.
And now we don't have enough electricians,
plumbers.
Exactly.
Right? And they're charging big money to get some work done, man.
Absolutely. So for me, the pandemic was kind of just like a 180 shift for changing careers. And for me personally, I do and did miss school. Yeah. But I also realized that I'm considerably happier doing this now. Now that I've kind of made new friends, especially. I think that was a big thing for a lot of people since the world kind of shut down. It was like, well, how do I make friends? Like, where do I go? Like, how do I hang out with people? We're supposed to kind of shelter in place, so I'm getting lonely. So that was a big thing too, I think, for a lot of people.
That socialization kind of got lost for that space of time, unless you were playing a video game and talking to people that you were talking to wherever. Other than that, you were kind of just sitting at home. If you were home alone, you were literally, I was home alone, but I didn't mind because I worked like a maniac. Yeah. Because I was like, I will go crazy just sitting at home doing nothing. Let me just work.
And that was something that I had to get used to too, because right before the pandemic hit, I had 3 jobs and I was going to school. I worked as a bartender. I worked as a coach. Yeah. So all of my jobs, I worked as a referee. All of my jobs were front-facing people. I interacted with people on a daily basis. And now you're telling me, okay, cool, well, we're shutting down restaurants. well, school's moving to online, no after school activities. So I'm like, okay, cool. So I'm not refereeing, I'm not coaching, I'm not serving people drinks.
What am I doing?
What am I doing now?
What am I doing now?
I get up, I go to school, and well, that's it. And even now that it's online, I'm not even going to do anything.
It's an adjustment. That period of time was an adjustment. For me, yes, I'm a nurse. I quit my full-time job and I became a travel nurse. But the big thing for me was, what am I doing with my life?
Mm-hmm.
If I, God forbid, passed away tomorrow, I'm going to look back and say, this is what I did. And then I was just like, what the hell did I do?
Yeah.
And I had a period, and I didn't even know this until recently. So I was talking to you guys before about festivals and concerts and my love of music. Somewhere in between there, I lost all of that. And then I was just like, wait. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and she revealed to me at some point that, you know, she was taking medication for depression, and she's a nurse also. And I was just like, huh. She's like, yeah, I had no idea. And then I'm like, well, depression must have hit a lot of people, not just people in the medical field.
Absolutely.
Everyone. And that's a huge topic right now. Who's depressed, who's reevaluating their lives. And it's like, man, I really don't want to do this anymore. I really need to change, but I don't know how to go about that. For me, it was, I didn't realize because I kept myself so busy that something was missing until recently where I was just like, holy crap. I like screaming music again. It was like a thing that just kind of, a light bulb just kind of went off, and I said, when did I lose that?
When did you stop feeling like you were you?
Exactly. When did I lose who I was during this time period? And now I'm like relearning myself and relearning the things that I like and saying, oh my goodness, life is not just about working or going to school. There's a whole life out there for us to explore and for us to do things and to make yourself happy. You know, all of these different things. Did you guys have any experiences where you felt like you were depressed or had a period where you're just like, man, I don't feel like who I am?
Yeah.
I think another thing, just before we get into that subject, that's interesting that I feel is like when you talk about your pandemic experience or your pandemic experience, people talk about like, I had so much time and I was lonely and I was all these things. And I think I still work my full-time job plus additional things. Like I was just like, oh, I never had that. Like I was living with my partner and he was working as well. So we both kept working our full-time jobs. And it was just when I think people are like, I got into art, I got into food, I was able to do this. I was like, I didn't do any of that.
Right? It makes you feel bad.
I wish I had some, like, I think that would have been a completely different experience, obviously, but I'm like, oh, I want to, like, learn how to make pasta. I want to.
That was a big thing. People are like, man,
I know how to make bread.
I was just want to say that. I'm making bread
bread
from scratch.
Yeah.
What? Like, when did you have time to learn to make bread from scratch? Oh, you had time to learn to make bread.
Right? And I'm
I remember the first apartment I was in Philadelphia, I made bread almost every other week.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it though.
It sounds like an amazing skill that I probably will never learn. But yeah, people are like, I had time to make bread. And I'm like, bro, when did you have time?
Yeah.
Here's a bread. I'm like, okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. But yeah.
So there's a loss, right? Like everybody in some way experienced a loss of something. And now as we reflect back, it's like a loss of a time that you didn't get to have.
Like I'm almost
like, that's
it
interesting.
Sounds so silly, but I'm almost like jealous of people who got that. I'm like,
yes.
I think it would have been interesting.
A little bit.
I have discovered? What could I have like kind of gotten more
That's
into
fair.
or researched a little bit more that I was just like in this COVID
in a bubble
tornado.
Yeah,
that
you were
was
in
just
that
like,
bubble.
Work, sleep, try not to infect anyone.
Yeah,
else.
exactly.
Like, work, sleep, think about if you have COVID. Like, and I'm like, oh, I want to do that. Like, I just think it's a different experience hearing different people talk about it. And I often speak with healthcare people about it. So to hear from a completely different perspective is just very interesting.
It's refreshing.
Yeah.
But did you guys have any bouts of depression or anything like that during that time where you phased out of it? You're breathing heavy over there. All right, well, we're just gonna start with you.
So for me, it was like honestly like very close to the beginning when there was a lot of uncertainty. So I'm like, okay, cool, you know, all right, cool. So again, like so I worked in a bar and I worked as a coach. So two things where my entire day is dealing with facing with people.
Yeah.
So when the bar shut down, when school shut down, I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I miss my kids, but it's okay. Give it a few weeks. Okay, it's been a couple of months. All right, now we're like 5 months in, and I'm like, hey, am I still employed by you guys? Or like, no, we're still employed, but it's just like, with the COVID restrictions. Oh, okay. Hey, is the bar gonna open anytime soon? We don't know because of COVID restrictions. So for me, that's kind of where all of my loneliness set in, is when you're constantly interacting with people on a day-to-day basis, and you kind of just take that away. You're like, oh, well, now who do I talk to? Even if
myself.
You do have,
And that's hard.
You're effectively alone with yourself.
Yeah.
So for me, it was that, and then I want to say about a year into it, maybe a year and a half into it, that's when I started working at the pharmacy as a pharmacy technician, which, if none of you have worked in, it is a soul-crushing job. It really is, because you kind of get into a everyday swing of things. Like every job has the normal swing. So it's like, okay, cool. 8 a.m. I check into trauma. I go and I do my rounds. I check on my patients or anything like that, right? But you don't have the same cases every single day. You never know what's going to come to the floor. And maybe you have somebody who has, I don't know, if they have like a failing liver or something like that. Maybe you have somebody who's pregnant. You're getting ready to deliver a baby. It's always different in a hospital. You never know what's going to walk through your door. But I know for me, every day I clock in at 8 a.m. Well, start counting out 30 atorvastatin. Okay, cool. Start counting out another 60 baby aspirin. And it's a very cut and dry job. Yeah. And for the first 3 months or so, you're learning. You're really learning. Okay, what's the difference between, this insulin, that insulin? Why is this not considered to be insulin? All right, great. But then after those 3 months, there's nothing else that you can really do. Okay, cool. You learn how to read a chart. Okay, you learn how to maybe do typing for a script. But after that, that's kind of it. Yeah. You're not really talking in a pharmacy. So even though you do have coworkers that you're working besides, it's only, hey, did you print that label for me? Hey, we're out of 40 milliliter vials. Hey, we need this. We have to restock that thing. And that's kind of it. Yeah. So for me, it was do that job where no one talks to each other. It's the same thing day in and day out. And then I go home and I don't have anyone to talk to because everybody else is kind of busy with their day-to-days. And it's not like I can just get up and go out and socialize because everything is shut down. So for me, that was kind of where my depression set in. So the closest to an escape that I had at that point was taking my dog to a dog park and sitting outside and just watching him run circles. And I'm like, hope somebody else with a dog comes in. Hi! But then, even then, no one really wants to socialize.
Yeah, nobody wants to talk to you.
Everybody thinks you might be sick. They don't know where you've been. If you bubble. Exactly. If you do go into that dog park, you're going to sit all the way over there and be like, hi! So for me, that was kind of when I had my depression spell. It was about a year and a half in.
How did you deal with that, though? How did you, when you were in it, you knew you were in it, but how did you, first off, identify it fully? And then how did you wiggle your way out of that?
So the way that I identified it was I tried to look at what was the largest difference from my life a year and a half before. So like you said, running around school and everything else to now. And again, I realized that the main factor was people.
Okay.
I couldn't be around people. I didn't have the ability to just go and socialize and go into those spaces and make friends. The way that I dealt with it was Discord. Discord is an online app. There's also like a cell phone app, but it's primarily used for gamers.
Okay.
There are people who do like a lot of other things with it, but gaming is like one of the big backbones of it. So for me, I kind of got more into Discord. I got more into the dice making space through also Discord. They have their own servers and everything. And that was kind of how I supplemented. I met people online through this app. And they have become some of my very closest friends to this day, where I can call them and they're like, hey, did you see the new game that came out? Hey, do you want to watch a movie today? And that was another thing too that I didn't realize, is that you can do a lot just online. I've watched movies with people. I have started entire book series and reading different novels with people where I'm like, oh my God, did you get to chapter 20 yet? And like, that's kind of how I had to make up for the lack of people physically, is through kind of meeting people digitally.
Yeah.
That's actually
You
a
found
good,
community.
yeah, exactly. Your own little niche that you can communicate with people and still socialize, maybe not physically,
Exactly.
face to face, but online is it. Now to kind of move away from the pandemic talk a little bit. So everybody's on my show, and this is just talking about topics that you would like to kind of see in the future, possibly. We're gonna stay away from politics because that's not my jam.
Yeah.
I can't really speak on that too much, but in the future, like what type of things would you like me to talk about or me to cover? Just quickly off the top of your head.
I think from a nursing perspective, one thing that I find very interesting that I wish more people would talk about would be your being a travel nurse and the reality of being a travel nurse.
Oh, okay.
I find that interesting. But I also think the transition from working in a hospital to travel nursing, and I also think the transition from a nursing student to a whatever full-time nurse you choose to be, which I think there's a lot of different things you can do with it. But I think that is a very anxiety-provoking time. And when I personally went through it, maybe 5 years ago, I found it very lonely. And I was like, I'm the only one who feels this way, blah, blah, which was not at all true. But
then we had some cookies and tea.
But it was really challenging for probably like a full year. And I think if more people, I think sometimes they see the bright, shiny, I only work 3 days a week. And I make a good salary. And I get to travel nurse. I get to go everywhere. And people don't talk about, like, it's really hard.
They don't see when you first start, everybody kind of thinks you're stupid.
Yeah.
Where you don't know anything until you get into the swing of things and something happens and they're just like, oh, that person knows what they're doing. And for me personally, I'll be honest, I'll let you think whatever you feel necessary to think, but I'm going to do my job to the best of my ability. And if you see it, you see it. If you don't, you don't. I'm only there for a short period of time. Not to say and that's what I actually enjoy, because I have such a short attention span sometimes that after a while I'm like, okay, what's next? And that's kind of where I saw myself post everything. I love being in a job for a long period of time. You build a family, you have such great people. I 110% appreciated my last job, full-time job, and saw the differences as I'm doing traveling, because I do traveling in endo. I haven't been on the floors or anything like that. It's specifically in endo, and I see the massive differences. And the hospital that I was at, top tier. In terms of the staff I worked with, amazing. The physicians I worked with, amazing. But you do have that transition period as starting on the floor, something where you're just like, okay, where do I find needles? Or you're in a room and anesthesia asks you for something. And I'll be honest, I'm that person. I'll be like, I don't know what you're talking about. Where can I find it? Like, tell me where to look. I have no idea.
Do you think you would have had the confidence to say that in like your first year?
Definitely not.
Like that's
I would not, 100% not. And a lot of people are like, well, I did clinic and now I'm a travel nurse or whatnot in XYZ. And I'm like, I know this is stereotypical. You don't necessarily have to do it. No, I didn't start off in med surg. I started off in psych, but that type of environment, step down, med surg, or tele, gives you that confidence, because number one, you're interacting with so many people that you have to speak to people. You have to delegate. You have to say someone that you think, because when you're a new nurse, you're just like, oh my God, he's a doctor or she's a doctor. After a few years of that, you're like, oh, that's Jane. Jane's over there. Okay, let me go talk to, You don't have that confidence.
No, not at all. And I think it's really hard to develop.
It is extremely hard to develop, because you kind of, and not everyone does this, but you put people in like layers.
Yes.
I'm here, I'm the nurse.
Yeah.
The attending is here. The resident might be in
It's also the culture too.
Yeah.
Right? The hierarchy.
Like, I can't talk to this person that way, but after a while you're just like, you're a human. We'll have a conversation, because I'm a human too, and we'll have a human to human, adult to adult conversation where you're not going to talk down to me and I'm not going to take the crap that you're putting out there, type of thing. But I feel like it comes with experience. As a new nurse, man, it's hard to navigate your way through it, and because you start off feeling, and somebody said this to me the other day, I was getting my car fixed yesterday, and the guy that was driving, he's like, I'm on the spectrum. I said, thank you for letting me know, but we can have a full conversation. He said, one of my coworkers said to me the other day, do you feel big or do you feel small? And I was just like, wow. As in, me talking to you, am I putting you down or am I lifting you up? So do you feel big or do you feel small as I'm having this conversation with you? I was like, holy moly, man. I've never thought about it like that. That's crazy. That's a profound statement. And that's how I feel sometimes new nurses feel. They feel this big.
Yeah.
If you make a little mistake or if you don't know the right thing to pick up when you're having an RRT or an emergency situation, and then if you do a good job, a lot of people don't say you do a good job. Maybe your preceptor will say it, and now you feel amazing. You feel like you're on top of the world, but you still have to come to work tomorrow, and you might make another mistake to make you feel this small. It's a transition. Definitely. But I do like the idea of maybe having someone new discuss their progression, and because that's what the internet's for, right? I'm looking on there to be like, oh, you did this just like I did. How did you do it? How can I do it better? Or how can I develop the confidence to do X, Y, Z? So that's a really, really good idea. There's a lot of travel blogs and stuff, and I don't know if I will actually travel blog, but I like the idea of interviewing a few people just to get their experiences. So thank you. Thank you very much.
And in addition to confidence, I think, or is this part of it, self-trust. So when students I interact with in the lab setting, the simulated lab setting, when they identify a difference or if they identify something that's, not what was expected or something different, I really celebrate that because that is what being a new nurse really is all about. It's like something is wrong here, or I don't quite know what it is. I don't quite know what that heart sound is. I don't really know, but my patient just doesn't seem right. Like that takes years really to develop, but the seeds begin even in nursing school, right? But how many of us can really fully trust ourselves and trust our own decision making? I feel like that's been taken away from us a lot culturally. So, or maybe that was just maybe my experience, but I find myself saying a lot, I believe you.
Yeah.
And maybe I need to hear that, so I say it.
Yeah, we need a little bit of validation from people that have experience too. Yeah. And then this goes for all walks of life. I always look at, and this may be a little off topic, but the generation coming up, especially being like Caribbean, some people don't teach you the things that they need to teach you. I don't mean to whisper, but they don't teach you. It's like you don't pass things down. And I'm at the point where I'm just like, okay, now it's time for our generation to pass things down, for people to learn X, Y, Z, to pass the mic on to the next person. You're not stopping what you're doing, but you have to educate the next generation on something. And I know we keep talking about nursing, but in nursing, where they say nurses eat their young, some of them actually do eat their young because you're not validating that person for doing a good job, or saying, hey, you did this, but this is what you need to do. And how we discuss things with people make a huge difference. How you talk to them. Again, another thing that I saw the other day was just, telling someone a comment that may be perceived as being mean based on the setting and based on the time. There's a time and place to say it. So if you are making dice and you put the wrong, I don't know what the dice is, excuse me for not knowing, but like whatever you put on it and you put the wrong thing on the wrong side, instead of that person jumping down your throat and being like, oh my God, I can't believe you did this. You realize that you already did the mistake. You already acknowledged it. Now for that person to take a step back and in 2 hours come back and be like, hey, I saw that you did X, Y, or Z. Maybe next time do this to pay attention a little more to get, but sometimes we don't do that. We're just like, what the hell are you doing? And it's just, you're startled. Now you're startled, you're on the spot and you're freaking out.
And I think it depends too. I mean, especially in nursing, sometimes it's like people's lives are on the line. Like if you mess up, like
you can mess up. I know.
So I think sometimes the nurses eat their young culture, at least in my experience, isn't as prevalent as it used to be. And I think people are a lot more supportive of new nurses, but I do think that sometimes it's fear-based because they don't want any harm to come, and people don't always express that in the best way. And I think having someone who started in the ICU, everything started up here. So if something went bad, now we're up here.
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
like
yeah,
you're
yeah.
already on edge, and to spend 12 hours a day, 3 days a week like that is like
it's a lot.
really grueling. And especially when it takes months and months to feel comfortable.
Yeah,
It's not like,
yeah.
2 weeks I'll feel a little better. It's
No.
like,
Yeah.
no, maybe 2 years you'll feel a little better, and then you still have a lot to learn. So I think it's an extremely challenging time, and I wish more people were more vocal about that, because I think all nurses go through that on some level, and some nurses kind of make it over that hump and then feel confident, and some kind of
everything's about, there are people who sculpt, there are people who do pottery, there are people who do voice acting. And I was like, I never thought about the person who voices the panda from Kung Fu Panda. And that was what we actually ended up doing, was doing the dubs for Kung Fu Panda while we were in school as like an assignment. And like for me, it was like, this is so much fun. I get to sit here and like have all this emotion through a character and kind of breathe life into it. So
That's awesome.
Voice acting is my thing too.
Wow. That's so cool.
I gotta think about the VTubing thing. To me, that's like crypto. I don't know nothing about it. Same. I don't know. And as you guys are talking, I know I'm asking different questions, but I am keeping in my memory bank all of these little things. So I'm like, ooh, that sounds amazing. That sounds awesome. If I had to answer my own questions that I've been asking, I would do this full time if it paid eventually. But I also, kind of along the lines with you, Gina, I wanted to open a venue and have smaller bands play so they can get out there, tour and all that stuff. But I would have a venue open, like I'll have a bar and then have a stage or something in the back. I used to have not used to, but one of my friends and I, since we were, in our early 20s, I'm not going to say how old I am, we were saying, we should own like a small venue or something like that. But there are bigger, I keep saying festivals and stuff, that people come up with these ideas and it grows into something. I would like to do something of that nature in not just the music industry, but in like the metal or hardcore industry. That would be awesome. And what do I enjoy now? Again, back to the music. I can't get away from that. I booked like 4 festivals already this year. I would do that as much as possible, because that's where I find my joy, and that's where I have fun. No more getting like kicked in the face, because I'm not getting into that crowd.
But kicked in the face?
I would not be in the pit, but I would always be close to the pit, and there would always be some form of injury or pressure point. I don't even know how to say it. But I'm not. My friend and I are going to see Avenged Sevenfold eventually. I can't say the date, but
I just wanted to say eventually.
I'll go back to my phone now.
Okay, brings me joy. Okay, I'll put it over here.
She literally texted me. She's like, "Oh, I'm getting these tickets. Do you want to stand or sit?" And I was like, "Bitch, sit. I want to sit. I don't want to stand. Those kids can stand. We're over 30. We need to sit." I was like, "Sit." But that's the kind of thought process, that I'm in right now. I'm heavily into that. And if I was not doing nursing, I would hope to do something in music, not instrumentally, because I cannot play anything and I cannot sing to save my life. I would keep my day job. But owning a venue, coming up with some type of a festival, doing interviews with bands and stuff like that would be something that I would like to do full time. I think that this is the perfect time to kind of break your cards out. Okay. So we can do a little card action.